The moon hung heavy over the kingdom of Lunaris, its silver glow spreading across the stone circle where the pack had gathered. Hundreds of wolves stood in disciplined silence, their breath visible in the cold air, their hearts thrumming with anticipation. Tonight was the night the Alpha King would finally meet his fated mate, the one destined to stand beside him, rule beside him, and carry the legacy of the moon's spirit itself. At the center of it all stood Rydian Vale, Alpha of Alphas, crowned not by gold, but by the weight of victories and scars carved from years of battle. His silver eyes burned with authority, his presence bending the air around him. For 7 long years, the bond mark on his wrist had remained dim, the mark of an unfulfilled destiny. But tonight, under the lunar light, it pulsed faintly, signaling that his time had come. The air tightened as Elder Mira stepped forward, her robe embroidered with ancient runes. She raised the moonstone staff high, its tip catching the moonlight. By the will of the goddess, she intoned, the fated shall be revealed. Let the chosen step forward. The crowd shifted, murmurs rippling through them like nervous wind. At the edge of the circle, hidden behind the higher-ranked wolves, a young woman stood motionless. Her hood shadowed her face, her frame slender, her hands trembling around a small pouch of healing herbs. Her name was Araya Solen, known by few and dismissed by most. A healer from the Omega quarters, an orphan with no rank, no voice, and no place among kings. When the moonlight struck the mark on Rydian's wrist, it flared. A sudden, searing burst of white that mirrored another mark glowing faintly beneath Araya's sleeve. The crowd gasped. She bears the bond mark, Mira whispered. The pack parted like water, clearing a path toward the trembling girl. Araya lifted her hood slowly, revealing a face that looked like moonlight made flesh, soft, scarred, and silent. She tried to speak, but no sound escaped her lips. Her throat bore faint, healed scars, the remnants of a wound long past. Rydian's expression hardened. No, he said under his breath, almost to himself. This cannot be. The elder frowned. The mark is clear, my king. The moon herself. The moon, Rydian interrupted sharply, makes no mistakes, but perhaps the messenger does. He turned his back deliberately, his voice carrying across the silent courtyard. 7 years I've led this kingdom. 7 years I've fought wars, rebuilt walls, buried warriors, all waiting for the one destined to strengthen my line. And this, his tone darkened, is what fate grants me. A voiceless healer with no rank and no wolf to her name. Gasps broke from the crowd. The words hit like stones. Araya lowered her gaze, her heartbeat quickening. She raised her hands, trying to sign, to explain, to plead, but her movements were ignored. Enough, Rydian commanded. Remove her from the circle. She dishonors the ritual. The guards hesitated. No one dared defy the Alpha, yet even they seemed uneasy. Elder Mira's voice trembled with protest. My king, the bond mark. I reject it, he said coldly. I reject her. The bond pulse between them flickered. Pain seared across Araya's chest as though invisible claws tore through her heart. Her knees buckled, but she did not fall. Instead, she took a step forward, one single, defiant step, into the sacred pool behind him. The water glowed faintly as her feet touched it, golden threads spreading out from where she stood. The crowd murmured in confusion. Rydian turned sharply, anger in his eyes. But then the light began to shift. It wasn't the usual silvery shimmer of moonlight. It was gold. Warm, alive, pulsing with rhythm. The glow spread across the pool's surface, climbing up the stones, spilling into the air itself. Wherever it touched, wilted flowers revived, old cracks in the courtyard sealed, the faint groans of the sick softened. The pack gasped as the change became undeniable. The air around them felt lighter, almost healing to breathe. Elder Mira dropped to her knees. A celestial healer, she whispered in awe. A true descendant of the first light. Rydian's composure fractured for the first time. His wolf stirred uneasily within him, growling not from anger but confusion. He had seen many forms of power, raw, violent, destructive, but never this. Never power that mended, instead of destroyed. Araya's hands trembled. She lifted them again, signing desperately, her silent plea clear through her eyes. Let me prove myself. But Rydian's pride burned hotter than wonder. End this mockery, he barked. The sacred pool is not a stage for. A child's scream cut through the air, high, panicked, near the edge of the courtyard. The pack turned as a healer rushed forward, cradling a small boy, his body limp, skin streaked with black veins. Poison! The healer shouted. The rogue's toxin spread faster than expected. He won't last a minute. Araya's head snapped toward the sound. Without hesitation, she splashed through the pool, her gown heavy, her hair unbound, her steps urgent. Rydian moved to block her, but Elder Mira's hand shot out. Let her. Araya knelt beside the child. She placed her palms on his chest. A faint hum filled the air, soft at first, then growing, vibrating through the stones themselves. The golden light surged again, flowing from her hands into the boy's body. The black veins faded. The child's chest rose once, twice, and then his eyes opened. He gasped, crying out. Alive. The silence that followed was thunderous. Rydian stood frozen, every instinct torn between disbelief and something deeper, something dangerous. The woman he had just rejected had healed a dying child before his eyes. The pack dropped to their knees instinctively. Elder Mira whispered words none could fully catch, but Rydian heard them. When the silent one heals, the prophecy begins. Araya swayed, exhaustion painting her features pale. She met Rydian's eyes for a moment, not pleading, not angry, but heartbreakingly calm, before she collapsed. The guards rushed forward, catching her before she hit the ground. Rydian turned away sharply, though his chest burned with a strange ache that wasn't entirely his own. He clenched his fists, the mate bond tugging like a chain between them. She will be taken to the healer's wing, Elder Mira said softly. For her safety, and perhaps for yours. But the Alpha said nothing. He only walked away, his cape brushing the stones that still glowed faintly gold. Hours later, when the moon had shifted west and the ceremony grounds emptied, Rydian stood alone in his chamber. The memory of that light, her light, refused to fade. It had touched something in him he didn't want to name. Pride battled confusion, and confusion lost ground to something worse. Guilt. He looked at the faint scar on his wrist where the bond mark had pulsed. It had dimmed, but not died. He could still feel her heartbeat faintly through it, slow and unsteady. Outside, Elder Mira stood on the balcony, watching the fading glow of the moon pool. She whispered to the shadows. The prophecy of the 7 nights has begun. Her voice carried softly on the night air. 7 nights for a king to see beyond pride. 7 nights for a healer to prove her heart. Should they both fail, the bond will break, and the moon will weep for 1,000 years. The next morning, whispers spread like wildfire through the kingdom. Some called her a blessing, others a curse, but no one could forget what they had witnessed. In the lower quarters, Araya awoke on a small cot, her body aching but alive. Her brother Kir sat beside her, eyes red from worry. He clasped her hand. They're saying you glowed like the moon itself, he whispered, that you healed a dying boy in front of the Alpha King. She smiled faintly, shaking her head. Her fingers moved quickly, signing a message he could barely follow. He hates me. Kir's jaw tightened. Let him. You don't need his approval to be who you are. But Araya's gaze turned distant, her bond to Rydian flickering faintly again, tugging softly at her heart. She could feel his turmoil through it, faint but undeniable. Far across the palace, Rydian sat in the War Council chamber, but he wasn't listening to his advisors. The memory of her eyes haunted him, calm even in humiliation, steady even as he rejected her. It unsettled him more than any enemy ever had. Draven, his beta, noticed his distraction. "You don't believe she's what the prophecy spoke of?" Rydian's answer was sharp. "I believe what I see. And what I saw was a healer with uncontrolled power. That kind of magic is unpredictable or sacred," Draven countered. "The moon doesn't mark mistakes." Rydian's stare silenced him, but doubt was already crawling through the Alpha's thoughts. That night, under a quieter sky, Araya slipped out of her chamber. Her steps were slow, cautious, the halls empty. She moved through the shadows toward the edge of the healer's wing, where faint coughing echoed. Inside the ward, a dozen wounded warriors lay pale, their skin marred by the same poison she had drawn from the boy. She could feel the energy inside her, fragile yet warm, urging her to act. She pressed her hands to the nearest soldier's chest, the golden light blooming faintly again. One by one, she began to heal them, quietly, methodically, her strength dwindling with each pulse. Unseen by her, Draven stood in the doorway, watching. When the final soldier opened his eyes, color returning to his face, Draven whispered to himself, "She's saving the pack he swore to protect." The scene shifts to the Alpha's quarters. Rydian wakes abruptly, heart pounding. Through the faint bond that still lingers, he feels it. Her exhaustion, her fading pulse, the echo of power leaving her body. He storms from his chamber, his instincts overriding pride. He finds Draven carrying the unconscious healer from the ward, her body limp, her pulse weak. "She's been healing the poisoned all night," Draven says, breathless. She didn't stop until the last one breathed again. Rydian's jaw tightens. "Take her to my wing?" Draven hesitates. "My king, that's an order." By dawn, Araya lies beneath white sheets in the Alpha's chamber, her face ghost pale, her breathing shallow. Rydian sits beside her, arms folded, the room heavy with silence. Every moment he watches her, something inside him cracks. He reaches out once, hesitates, then takes her hand lightly, not as a king, but as a man uncertain for the first time in his life. Her fingers twitch weakly in response. Outside, Elder Mira watches through the moonlit window. "The second night approaches," she murmurs. "The heart learns humility, whether it wishes to or not." Day 2. The healer in exile. Morning came slow, reluctant, as if the sun itself feared touching what had happened beneath the moon. In the royal chamber, the Alpha King watched the woman he had rejected lie motionless. Araya's breathing was shallow, a whisper of sound that barely stirred the sheets. Rydian had sat awake all night, still wearing the same cloak he'd worn to the ceremony, unable to look away from her face. When the first light spilled through the windows, he rose. Every instinct told him to leave. He was Alpha. He had councils to attend, reports to hear. But his hand lingered on the doorframe. He could still feel the faint hum of their unfinished bond, tugging gently at his pulse like a question left unanswered. Outside, the castle had not yet shaken off the rumors. Servants spoke of a girl born of moonfire, of an Alpha who turned from destiny, of a prophecy older than any living wolf. No one dared speak her name near the throne room, yet everyone whispered it once they were sure the guards were gone. Down in the healer's wing, Elder Mira entered quietly, her cane tapping once against the floor. She glanced at Araya, then at Rydian. "She will wake soon," she said. But the bond's rejection cut deep. "Your strength will not shield you from its echo." "I feel nothing," he lied. The elder's gaze sharpened. "Then perhaps you've already begun the first trial. Pride always bleeds before it learns. She turned toward the door. When she wakes, she must leave the palace. The prophecy cannot unfold under your roof. Radian caught her arm. You think I'll allow her to wander the forest alone? The border packs would tear her apart. The moon will guard her, Mira said. The first day was yours, King. The second belongs to her. He released her slowly. The elder's words left an ache behind them, one he couldn't name. Later, when Adaya stirred, she found herself alone. A tray of water and bread waited beside the bed, untouched. For a long moment, she lay still, trying to gather the pieces of what had happened. Fragments returned. The boy she had saved, the golden light, the pain of rejection burning through her chest. She sat up, dizzy but determined. Her fingers moved across the blanket, tracing silent words only she could read. I'm still here. Keir slipped through the door moments later, carrying a bundle of cloth. His relief was immediate. You scared me half to death, he said. Do you even know how long you've been asleep? She shook her head. 2 days. They say the Alpha ordered you kept alive. His voice dropped to a whisper. And now they say you're being sent away. Araya's eyes flickered. She reached for the bundle he carried, opening it to find her old cloak and the small satchel of herbs she always kept hidden. She signed a question. Where? The abandoned cottage at the edge of the forest. Mira arranged it, said it was safer there until whatever this prophecy is runs its course. She nodded once. There was no anger in her expression, only quiet acceptance. She had known exile before. It no longer frightened her. By dusk, she had left the palace behind, moving through the thick woods toward the cottage Keir described. The moon followed her between the trees, faint light guiding each careful step. When she reached the clearing, she paused. The cottage was small, forgotten, half swallowed by vines, but there was a roof and a hearth, and that was enough. Inside, she lit the single lantern left on the table. Dust floated in the air. On the wall hung a faded tapestry of the moon goddess, one hand raised toward the stars, the other pressed to the earth. The image made Araya's chest tighten. She placed her fingers over her throat, remembering the voice she once had, the songs her mother taught her before silence became her prison. Outside, a wolf howled. She closed her eyes and listened, not to fear, but to the rhythm of life moving beyond pain. Hours passed. She unpacked her herbs, set a kettle on the fire, and began sorting dried leaves with the precision of a prayer. Healing was her language. It had always been the only way she knew how to speak. Far across the forest, Rydian stood on the balcony overlooking the packlands. The council had dispersed hours ago, yet he hadn't moved. Draven approached quietly. The scouts found her trail. She reached the cottage. Rydian's jaw tightened. She shouldn't be alone. She's not helpless, Draven replied. You saw what she did with your own eyes. That's what worries me, Rydian muttered. Power like that attracts more than admiration. Then send guards. I can't, the Alpha said. The prophecy forbids interference. Mira made that clear. Draven studied him for a moment. You don't believe in prophecies. Rydian's silence was answer enough. Night deepened. In the Omega district, mothers whispered of a faint glow moving between the huts. Children, fevered from the wasting sickness, stirred and breathed easier as the light passed their doors. Arya moved through the shadows quietly, hood pulled low, hands glowing faintly gold. A woman stepped forward, eyes wide. Please, she begged, pointing to a pallet where her son lay shivering. Arya knelt without hesitation. Her palms touched the boy's forehead. Warmth spread. The tremors eased. When his eyes fluttered open, his mother wept. Word traveled fast. By the next night, the forgotten alleys of Lunaris were alive with quiet hope. The silent healer had returned. But not all who heard were grateful. In the palace, the royal healer Malric stood before a mirror, grinding herbs into powder. The reflection staring back at him was drawn tight with envy. He had spent decades mastering remedies. Yet a mute girl could do what he never could: heal the incurable, bend the poison itself. His hands shook as he whispered to the shadows, "If her light spreads, mine will be forgotten." The shadows listened. At the forest edge, Araya's strength waned. Every healing left her weaker, but she refused to stop. Kyr scolded her each morning, bringing food she never ate. "You're going to burn yourself out," he said, setting down another bowl of stew. She smiled faintly and sighed, "There are still children sick." He groaned, "You're worse than the elders." She touched his cheek gently, a silent thank you, and returned to her herbs. Later that night, as she mixed salves, the bond mark on her wrist pulsed again, softly at first, then with growing strength. She froze. Through that faint connection, she felt it: Rydian's anger, his confusion, his restless pacing. In the palace, the same pulse struck the alpha mid-step. He gripped his wrist, breath catching. The sensation wasn't pain. It was longing, mirrored and unwanted. He pressed his hand to his chest as if to silence it, but it only grew stronger. Draven entered. "You feel it too, don't you?" Rydian glared at him. "Leave it. Pretend if you want," Draven said, "but the bond doesn't lie. Whatever path she's walking out there, it's tied to you. The longer you fight it, the worse it'll tear." Rydian turned away, unwilling to hear more. Yet when night fell, he stood at the balcony again, eyes fixed on the distant forest. Somewhere out there, her light moved like a promise he had already broken. Back in the cottage, Araya sat by the fire, exhaustion creeping up her arms. She placed her hands near the flame and whispered in her mind the words she could never speak. "I forgive you." For a moment, the bond responded, a faint warmth brushing against her soul, like a breath on her skin. She smiled through tears she didn't fully understand. Outside, the forest wind rose. Somewhere beneath the roots, ancient runes glowed faintly, reacting to the same energy that pulsed through her veins. Elder Mira, watching from her tower, saw the glow and whispered, "The second day ends. The earth begins to wake." She turned toward the moon, her voice low. "May they both endure what comes with the third." Day 3, the bond rekindles. Dawn broke over the forest in streaks of muted gold. A fine mist clung to the valley where Araya's cottage lay hidden, softening the edges of the world. She had barely slept. Each time her eyes closed, she saw flashes of light: the child she healed, the alpha's gaze, the memory of rejection cutting through her ribs like a blade that refused to dull. In the quiet, she poured hot water into a clay bowl and pressed her palms above the steam. It shimmered faintly, responding to her gift. Healing energy pulsed from her fingertips. The herbs on the shelf trembled as though alive. She whispered silently to herself, counting each breath until the ache in her chest eased. The second day had taught her endurance. The third would test her heart. Across the kingdom, Rydian stood in the training field, sparring with 2 warriors at once. His strikes were precise, unrelenting, as if he could beat confusion out of his own muscles. Draven watched from the edge, arms folded. "You're punishing the wrong enemy," he called. Rydian didn't answer. Sweat ran down his temple. The faint pulse at his wrist wouldn't stop burning. He had tried to sever the bond's echo with sheer will, but the connection only grew stronger. When he finally stopped, breathing hard, Draven tossed him a water skin. "She's healing again," the beta said quietly. "The children in the lower district woke healthy this morning. You can feel it, can't you?" Rydian drank without looking up. "If she wants to heal the world, let her." "My pack isn't built on miracles," Draven sighed. "Maybe it should be. In the Omega district, joy was rare currency. But that morning, laughter returned to the narrow streets. Mothers hugged their children, traders offered food to strangers, and the name Araya became a prayer whispered between neighbors. When Araya left her cottage that afternoon, small footsteps followed her. A group of pups carried wildflowers, their eyes wide with shy gratitude. The smallest one tugged her sleeve and held out a blossom. "For the lady who makes the hurt go away." Her throat tightened. She knelt, accepted the flower, and touched the boy's head gently in blessing. No one noticed the faint shimmer that crossed the petals, the same golden hue that marked her power. By sunset, Elder Mira appeared at the cottage door. "You've done more in 2 days than our entire healing circle in a season," she said, settling into a chair by the fire. "But every gift has a cost. How many times have you collapsed already?" Araya hesitated, then raised 2 fingers. Mira's sigh was soft but heavy. "The prophecy measures both of you. Each act of mercy strengthens you but weakens the alpha. Each act of defiance he makes strengthens his pride but wounds the bond. Balance must come before the 7th day." Araya listened, eyes downcast. The elder reached out, touching her wrist where the mark still glowed faintly. "He'll feel this soon enough. When he does, you must choose whether to forgive him or finish what fate began." A sound broke the moment, the low rumble of thunder, though the sky was clear. Mira stiffened. The earth stirs again. Something ancient beneath these woods is waking. That night, Rydian dreamed for the first time in years. In the dream, the battlefield stretched endless before him, but the corpses of his enemies dissolved into light. A woman stood at the center, Araya, her hands raised, golden fire flowing between them. When she turned toward him, her eyes held both love and judgment. He woke with a start, the echo of her touch still on his skin. The mark on his wrist blazed bright enough to illuminate the chamber. Startled, he looked out the window toward the forest, half expecting to see that same light mirrored there. Draven burst through the door moments later. "The border patrols just reported strange movement underground, runes lighting near the old shrine. Mira says it's connected to the prophecy." Rydian pulled on his cloak. "Then we ride." The shrine lay deep within the forest, carved into the hillside long before Lunaris became a kingdom. Runes glowed faintly along the stone path, pulsing in rhythm with the bond mark on Rydian's wrist. He knelt, tracing one of them with his fingertips. It thrummed beneath his skin, alive. Mira emerged from the shadows behind him. "You can feel her through it, can't you?" He didn't answer. "The earth responds to both of you," she continued. "Light and shadow, pride and mercy. When one moves, the other follows. That's the law of the bond." "What happens if balance isn't restored?" he asked. Her expression turned grave. "Then the seals holding the ancient corruption below will break. Your pride will feed it, and her sacrifice will no longer be enough." For a long moment, the only sound was the low hum of the runes. Then Rydian said quietly, "She doesn't deserve this burden." "Nor do you deserve her pain," Mira replied. "Yet both are bound." Back at the cottage, Araya's hands shook as she ground herbs. Kier watched from the doorway, worry etched across his face. "You need rest. The fever's spreading again, and you're running out of strength." She smiled faintly and pointed to the stack of empty bowls. Each one represented a life she'd saved since leaving the palace. Her silence said everything. She would rather die healing than live doing nothing. When the fever patients had all fallen asleep, she stepped outside for air. The forest felt strange tonight. The ground beneath her feet vibrated faintly, a deep pulse coming from somewhere far below. She knelt, pressing her palm to the soil. For a heartbeat, she felt it clearly, something vast and ancient shifting beneath the roots. Her bond mark flared, matching the rhythm. Rydian's voice, raw and distant, echoed through her mind for the first time. "Where are you?" she gasped, clutching her wrist. It wasn't speech. More a thought brushed across her soul, but it was enough to make her chest ache. She whispered silently, "At the edge of your kingdom." The connection flickered, then faded, leaving her trembling. She sank to her knees, overwhelmed by the surge of feeling she could neither control nor deny. In the palace, Rydian staggered as if struck. Draven caught his arm. "What is it?" "She answered me," he said softly. "I heard her." Draven's eyes widened. "The bond shouldn't allow that unless it's mending," Rydian finished. He stared toward the forest. "She's calling without a voice. and the whole kingdom's answering. By dawn, rumors reached the capital again. The sickness had stopped. Fields once withered now showed green shoots. Streams, once black with rot, ran clear. The people began to speak of a coming dawn, unaware that the earth beneath their feet was cracking open. Elder Mira stood at the palace gates, watching the sunrise bleed across the horizon. "Day 3 ends," she murmured. "The bond rekindles, but so does the darkness. Tomorrow, the trials of truth begin. Day 4, the rising shadows." The fourth dawn arrived red and uncertain. A restless wind chased through the valley, stirring dust from the roads that led toward the northern forest. Every wolf in Lunaris could feel it, the shift beneath the soil, the faint vibration that made even the strongest uneasy. Araya woke before sunrise, her body still heavy from exhaustion. The glow around her wrists had dimmed to a faint pulse, but it was enough to remind her that the prophecy's clock was still ticking. She tied back her hair, wrapped her cloak tight, and stepped into the cool morning air. The world smelled of wet earth and storm. Kier followed her out, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "You heard it too?" he asked. "The rumble last night?" She nodded. Her fingers shaped silent words. "It's moving closer." Before he could answer, a rider galloped up the path. The beta, Draven. He dismounted in one fluid motion, eyes sharp. "You need to come," he said. "Now." Araya's gaze flicked to Kier, then back to him. "The Alpha found the source of the disturbance," Draven continued. "He asked for you," Kier bristled. "Asked?" He rejected her. Draven met his glare without flinching. "He didn't ask as a king. He asked as a man who doesn't know what's happening to his land." Araya hesitated only a moment before gathering her satchel of herbs. Whatever was happening, the earth was calling her as surely as it called him. The forest thickened as they rode. Sunlight filtered weakly through the canopy, fractured by shifting branches. By midday, they reached the clearing where Rydian waited. He stood beside a circle of blackened ground. Steam rose from cracks that hadn't existed the day before. When Araya dismounted, the air between them tightened. Months of pride and silence hung there like invisible chains. Rydian turned, and for the first time since the ceremony their eyes met. No words passed between them, yet the bond flared, a spark of heat, of memory, of pain. "You feel it too," he said quietly. She inclined her head. "The earth opened last night," Draven reported, kneeling to brush ash from a rune etched into the soil. Something burned through the wards. Araya crouched beside him, tracing the symbols. Her palm hovered above one crack. It was still warm, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. She frowned, then looked toward the trees where the roots swayed though no wind touched them. Rydian watched her every move. "What is it?" Her hands moved swiftly. Kier translated from behind her. "It's not just a crack, it's feeding. The same sickness that poisoned the children is spreading underground." Rydian straightened. "Can you stop it?" She hesitated, then signed again. "Not alone." Mira's voice drifted from the tree line as she emerged, robes catching the light. "Then you must stand together, Alpha." The prophecy warned of this. "If you refuse her bond again, your power will fail." Rydian's jaw tightened. "And if I accept?" "Your pride will break, but your kingdom will live," Mira said. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he stepped closer to Araya, close enough to catch the faint scent of herbs and smoke on her skin. "Tell me what to do." She reached out, hesitant, and placed her hand over the mark on his wrist. The ground answered instantly, a tremor that rippled through the clearing. Golden light shot from the cracks, climbing the trunks of nearby trees before fading into sparks. Mira exhaled slowly. The seal holds. For now, Araya swayed, drained. Rydian caught her before she fell. Their bond pulsed again, stronger this time, threads of light coiling around their joined hands. He could feel her heartbeat through the connection, steady but fragile. When she opened her eyes, his were already on her. "You risked yourself again," he murmured. "Why?" Her fingers trembled as she formed a single sign. "Because I'm bound to heal." The simplicity of it struck harder than any accusation. He released her slowly, turning away before the emotion in his chest betrayed him. That evening they made camp near the clearing. The warriors kept watch while Draven tended to the horses. Rydian stood at the edge of the firelight, staring into the forest. Araya sat nearby, grinding herbs into paste, her hands steady despite fatigue. After a while, he spoke without looking at her. "I thought silence meant weakness." She glanced up. "I was wrong," he said. "It's patience. It's strength I never had." A faint smile touched her lips, small but real. Kier, pretending not to watch, busied himself with the firewood. Draven caught his eye and nodded once, approval passing silently between them. Near midnight, the ground shuddered again. A fissure split open at the base of the hill, releasing a gust of foul air that extinguished half the flames. Rydian drew his blade. Draven and Kier moved to shield the healer. From the crack rose shapes that weren't quite shadows, whispering in voices that scraped against the soul. The warriors faltered. Even Rydian's wolf snarled inside him, uneasy. Araya stepped forward before anyone could stop her. She pressed both palms to the earth, light searing from her skin in a sudden burst. The shadows recoiled, shrieking into silence. When the glow faded, she was shaking. Rydian caught her again, holding her upright. "You can't keep doing this." Her answer was written on her face. "I must." Mira's voice broke through the tension. "The third day's trial begins at dawn. The corruption will return, stronger. Only the united bond can cleanse it." Rydian looked down at Araya, still trembling in his arms. "Then I'll stand with her." The elder's eyes softened. "Say it under the moon, and it will bind." He lifted his gaze to the sky. The moon hung low, blood-streaked but bright. By its light, he said, "I won't reject her again." The bond mark flared white gold, brighter than before. Araya's breath steadied, her exhaustion easing. For the first time, peace touched the edges of the clearing. Mira turned toward the forest. "Day 4 ends," she whispered. "The alpha learns humility, the healer learns trust. Tomorrow, the truth will ask its price." Day 5, the voice of the seer. Morning crept into the clearing with reluctant light. The fire from the night before had burned to ash, and thin smoke coiled upward between the trees. Rydian had not slept. He sat beside Araya, who still rested beneath his cloak, her breathing shallow but even. Every so often he reached out, brushing his thumb across the edge of her hand, as if to reassure himself she was still there. Draven and Kier had gone to fetch supplies, leaving the two of them in silence broken only by birdsong and the distant hum of the forest. The bond between them was steady now, a low warmth beneath the skin, but it pulsed with warning. The next trial was coming. When Araya stirred, Rydian rose immediately. "You should eat." She shook her head, signing slowly. "Not yet." "Something's coming," he frowned. "You can sense that." Before she could answer, the forest fell still. A figure stepped through the trees. A woman draped in traveling robes the color of moonlight, her hair silver white, her eyes clouded but clear within. Elder Mira bowed low. "Ser Anwen," she said. "The oracle of the northern pass." Rydian straightened. "You were thought lost to the storms." Anwen smiled faintly. "The storms move where they are needed. I came because the moon called me. The seals beneath your land are weakening faster than we feared." Araya pushed herself upright, the fatigue still in her limbs. The oracle's sightless gaze turned toward her. "So," the silent one breathes, "you carry the mark of the purifier." Mira nodded. She awakened the ancient light. Anwen's voice softened. "Then the 5th day belongs to her awakening and his repentance." She looked at Rydian. "You stayed by her side through the night. That was your first step. The second is to understand what silence costs." He looked down, jaw set. "Tell me what I must do." "Listen," the oracle said simply. She moved to the center of the clearing and unrolled a fragment of parchment, brittle with age. The runes upon it glowed as she read. 7 days to balance the heart and the crown. On the 5th, the seer shall speak the hidden wound. On the 6th, truth will divide what pride once joined. On the 7th, surrender will bind what love restores. Rydian felt the words settle on his shoulders like a mantle. "Hidden wound," he repeated. "What does that mean?" Anwen turned to Araya. "Show him." Araya hesitated, then reached for the scar along her throat. She traced it gently, the mark pale against her skin. Her fingers moved, hesitant but clear. When the rogues attacked my village, I warned the others. My voice carried far. They silenced it so I would never warn again. Rydian's chest tightened. That was 5 years ago. She nodded once. He took a step closer. The healer said, "No one survived that raid." "I did," she signed, "because my brother dragged me through the fire. The rest burned." Silence spread between them. For the first time, the Alpha had no command, no defense, only regret heavy in his throat. "If I'd known—" "You didn't want to know," the Oracle said gently. "You saw her silence and mistook it for weakness. You saw her scars and mistook them for shame. The hidden wound is yours, Alpha, not hers." The truth struck harder than he expected. Pride had been his armor so long he had forgotten what it felt like to stand bare within his own guilt. He looked at Araya and said quietly, "I wronged you." She studied his face for a long moment, then signed one word, "Learn." Anwen nodded approvingly. The bond mends through humility. The 5th day nears its end, but the heart has begun to turn. Later, as the sun dipped behind the hills, the group broke camp. Rydian rode beside Araya in silence, the forest spreading endless before them. The air smelled cleaner than it had in weeks. The cracks in the earth no longer smoked, though faint light still pulsed beneath the roots. Halfway to the palace, Draven rode ahead to scout the trail. Kier guided the horses behind them, humming an old tune his sister used to love before she lost her voice. Rydian glanced sideways. "When the prophecy ends, if we survive it, what will you do?" Araya thought for a moment, then signed, "Find a place where healing isn't a crime." He gave a small, tired laugh. "Perhaps that should be my kingdom?" Her eyes met his. The bond thrummed again, softer now, more like a promise than a wound. They reached the outskirts of Lunaris as twilight deepened. The palace rose ahead, its towers bathed in amber light. News of their approach had already spread. Guards lined the causeway, and council members waited in the courtyard. Rydian dismounted, helping Araya down before the stares of nobles who had once mocked her. The head counselor stepped forward. "My king, the healers report that the wells in the lower district are running clear again. Whatever curse lingered there is lifting." Rydian nodded but said nothing. His gaze stayed on Araya as she walked past the assembled pack, head held high despite her frailty. Whispers followed her like a second wind, but she didn't flinch. Inside the great hall, the oracle unfolded her scroll once more. "The 5th day ends. The kingdom breathes, but the 6th will test truth itself. Prepare your heart, Alpha, for tomorrow the council will hear what you kept hidden." Rydian looked up sharply. "What I kept hidden?" Anwen's clouded eyes seemed almost to see through him. "The reason you feared your destined mate. The truth you buried beneath duty?" He didn't answer. The hall grew heavy with silence. Araya felt the tension through the bond, a storm gathering behind his calm expression. Mira stepped forward. "Let it come." The prophecy demands no lies remain between them. Araya reached for his hand, tentative but steady. The touch grounded him. For the first time he allowed it, fingers closing around hers. The light from the bond spread between their palms, faint but growing. Outside, the moon rose full and pale, its light cutting through the stained glass windows. The oracle bowed her head. Day 5 closes. Tomorrow truth will break what pride built, and only love will hold what's left. Day 6, the weight of truth. The 6th morning arrived heavy with storm clouds. Thunder rolled far beyond the mountains, a slow warning that the day would not end in peace. Inside the great hall, candles flickered against stone walls as the council gathered, their voices low and uneasy. Araya stood near the dais beside Mira and the oracle, her hood drawn. Rydian entered last, the echo of his boots cutting through the murmurs. He wore no crown, only the dark cloak of his rank, and yet the air around him carried the weight of command. When he reached the center of the hall, the head counselor bowed. "My king, the people demand to know what threatens the kingdom. Rumors speak of corruption under our land, of prophecy and bond. What truth do we tell them?" Rydian's gaze shifted to the oracle. "You said the 6th the day tests truth. Let it begin." Anwen nodded. The corruption began long before either of you was born. The first alpha sealed it beneath Lunaris with a vow of love unbroken. But each generation weakened that vow with pride, until the bond itself became a wound in the earth. A ripple of unease passed through the chamber. Draven stepped forward. You mean every alpha since the founding carried part of the curse? Yes, the oracle said. And it awakened fully the night. The current alpha rejected his destined mate. Radian's shoulders stiffened, but he did not look away. Then the fault is mine. Whispers surged. The counselors exchanged wary glances. Some bowed their heads. Araya lifted her hands, signing slowly. It's not just his fault. Mira translated aloud. The curse feeds on pain, not on names. Both must forgive to end it. Anwen's blind eyes turned toward her, and yet forgiveness cannot bloom while secrets remain buried. She raised her staff. A beam of white light struck the floor, spreading outward like water. Within it appeared images drawn from memory. Scenes of fire and smoke, the raid on Araya's village, and among the attackers, the banner of the royal guard. Gasps filled the hall. Rydian stepped back, face drained of color. That cannot be. It was, the oracle said softly. Your father ordered the purge. He feared a prophecy that spoke of a silent child who would outshine every alpha born. He sent his soldiers to erase it. The weight of those words broke through the last of Rydian's composure. He looked at Araya, horror dawning. The raid that took your voice was his command. Her eyes filled, not with anger, but with the ache of recognition. The bond between them trembled, alive with old grief. Mira placed a hand on the oracle's arm. If the sins of the father created the curse, then the son must end it. How? Rydian asked, voice low. By truth made public, Anwen replied. By surrendering pride before those he rules. He turned toward the council. Then, hear it. My lineage brought this plague. My bloodline fed it. Every drop of power I command stands upon the ashes of her people. If my reign must end to save Lunaris, so be it. The hall fell silent. Even the storm outside seemed to pause. Araya stepped forward, removing her hood. Her hair caught the candlelight like spun gold. She placed a hand over his chest, where his heartbeat thundered. Slowly she signed one word, enough. Mira whispered the translation. She faced the council, her voice still locked in silence, yet her presence filled the room. Then she turned to the oracle and gestured to the runes on the floor. Golden light poured from her hands, intertwining with the white glow of the seer's staff. The images shifted, fire becoming rain, smoke dissolving into clear air. Anwen's voice trembled. She forgives. The bond completes the circle. Rydian sank to one knee before her, head bowed. And I swear before the moon and my people to rebuild what my family destroyed. No crown, no title, only truth. The mark on their wrists flared together, merging into a single radiant sigil that shone across the chamber ceiling. The counselors shielded their eyes as the light surged outward through the walls, racing across the city. Outside, the clouds broke apart. Sunlight pierced through for the first time in weeks. Draven's voice was hushed. The curse is breaking. Mira smiled faintly. The sixth day fulfills its promise. The earth breathes again, but the oracle's expression darkened. The bond is healed, yes, but the last day will demand a price. The seventh dawn decides whether love alone can keep the world whole. Rydian rose, still holding Araya's hand. Then we face it together. Anwen inclined her head. So it shall be. Day 6 ends. Outside, bells began to ring through the city, signaling renewal. Yet beneath the palace, in the caverns once sealed by ancient runes, something stirred, quiet, waiting, aware. Day 7, the dawn of balance. Before sunrise, the palace stood wrapped in mist. The bells that had celebrated renewal the night before were silent now, their echoes fading into the hollow hush of the seventh day. Every wolf in Lunaris felt it, the final pulse of the prophecy moving through their veins like a second heartbeat. Rydian watched the light crawl across the horizon from his balcony. The bond mark on his wrist still glowed faintly. It had not dimmed since the council. Each beat of it reminded him that the last trial waited below, in the caverns where the first alpha had sealed the corruption. Behind him, the door opened. Araya entered, her steps soft but certain. She wore the same cloak she had arrived in days ago, mended and clean. When she stopped beside him, the wind lifted a few strands of her hair across his arm. He looked at her, the question already in his eyes. "You feel it too?" She nodded, her hands moved. "It's calling us." Mira appeared moments later, followed by the oracle. The seer's face was grave. The seal weakens for the last time. What was bound by pride can only be restored by unity. You must go together, Alpha and Healer, Heart and Crown. Draven stepped forward. "We'll stand guard above." Rydian shook his head. "No one else enters." "This trial belongs to us alone." The oracle raised her staff, tracing a circle of light upon the floor. A hidden stairway opened beneath their feet, leading into darkness that pulsed with faint red glow. "Once you descend," she said, "the earth will close behind you. When the dawn breaks above, the world will know your choice." Rydian reached for Araya's hand. She took it without hesitation. Together they stepped into the light and vanished below. The air grew colder with each step. The tunnel wound deep, walls breathing faint traces of ancient energy. At the end lay a vast cavern, lit by the faint shimmer of runestones. In the center stood a crystal fissure, cracked and bleeding black mist. Rydian drew his sword instinctively. The blade's silver edge reflected the strange light. Araya released his hand and moved toward the fissure, her palms glowing gold. The mist recoiled but didn't vanish. He started forward. "If you touch it again, it'll drain you." She looked back, eyes steady. "Not if you're with me." He understood. Their powers had always mirrored, his born of strength, hers of mercy. Alone they faltered, together they completed the circle. He sheathed the sword, joined her at the edge, and placed his hand over hers against the stone. The cavern roared to life. Runes blazed across the walls, echoing in patterns of light. The black mist writhed, then condensed into a single shape, tall, shadowed, wearing the faint outline of a crown. A voice rolled through the chamber, old and broken. "You carry the same blood that bound me. Why free what your fathers chained?" Rydian's grip tightened on Araya's hand. "Because they chained the wrong thing. They bound guilt and called it order." The shadow laughed, a sound that cracked the air. "Then take their place, child of pride. Feed the seal with your soul." Araya stepped forward, her glow brightening. "No." The word formed soundless on her lips but struck the air like thunder. The shadow recoiled as light burst from her throat, brief and blinding, the first true note she had spoken in years. Rydian caught her as she stumbled, the echo still ringing through stone. The fissure trembled, cracks raced up the walls. "Araya?" She looked up at him, smiling faintly through tears. "My voice," returned. The shadow screamed, shrinking from the light that now poured from her. But the fissure pulled harder, drawing both of them toward its heart. Rydian anchored himself, pulling her back. "You'll burn if you stay." Her fingers clutched his wrist. Together, she signed. He shook his head. "Not like this." Together, her lips formed again. Understanding struck. The prophecy had never called for one sacrifice, but two halves of the same vow joined freely. If they faced it united, it would take their strength, but spare their lives. He drew her close, pressing his forehead against hers. Then together, they turned as one and thrust their joined hands into the fissure. Light exploded outward, white gold and blinding. The cavern shook, runes shattered into dust. The black mist screamed once, then dissolved into nothing. When the light faded, silence followed. The cracks sealed, leaving only the faint hum of balance restored. Rydian looked down, Araya's hand still in his, her chest rising slowly. Her eyes fluttered open, calm and clear. "It's done," he said quietly. She nodded, tears bright on her cheeks. Around them, the runestones dimmed to a steady blue glow, peaceful and still. Above ground, the oracle lifted her face to the dawn. "They've done it." Mira bowed her head. "The curse ends." Draven exhaled the breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "Then the seventh day is mercy." The earth beneath their feet rumbled once more, not in warning but in release. Cracks sealed, grass brightened, and sunlight spilled over the palace roofs. Moments later, the hidden stair reopened. Rydian emerged first, carrying Araya in his arms. The mark on their wrists had vanished, leaving only faint silver scars. The crowd that had gathered fell silent as he set her down gently. Anwen approached, tears in her clouded eyes. The prophecy ends as it began, with love unspoken yet understood. Araya looked up at Rydian, lips forming words she could barely voice. "Thank you." He smiled, a small, weary, honest smile. "No, Araya. Thank you for healing more than my people." The first rays of sunrise touched them, turning the world gold. Bells rang again, not in warning but in celebration. Mira's voice rose above the sound. "Day 7 ends. The bond holds. The kingdom lives." The oracle lowered her staff. "The moon watches. The story will be told for generations. How an alpha's pride met a healer's grace, and silence became salvation." The wind carried the scent of rain and new blossoms through the courtyard. Rydian reached for Araya's hand one last time, their fingers intertwining as the crowd bowed. The curse was gone, but the bond, quiet, eternal, remained. Epilogue: the moon's blessing. Weeks passed, and the kingdom breathed again. Where the earth had once cracked, green shoots pushed through the soil. Rivers ran clear, and the howls that echoed through the valley were songs of life, not warning. The people of Lunaris spoke of 2 names in the same breath: Aria, the silent healer, and Rydian, the alpha who chose humility over power. Together they had carried the prophecy to its end, and in doing so had rewritten the fate of their kind.